Welcome and good morning to everyone to Decorah UU. As you may have heard, my name is Nancy Barry. My pronouns are she and her, and I'll be leading the service today. We are a welcoming, lay-led spiritual community, moving together in time in an open search for truth and meaning. We believe in people's inherent capacity to lead ethical lives of personal fulfillment, pursuing the good of humanity. If you are visiting us today, we welcome you. We welcome you online, and we hope that there'll be a day somewhere in the future where we can all see each other in person. If you are a visitor to our service today, you can complete the form at decorahuu.org, contact us to receive our weekly electronic newsletter or to learn more about our congregation. And then you can learn more about Unitarian Universalism at uua.org. Before we begin with other chalice lightings and parts of the service, we want to have announcements. For the sake of those of you who may be joining by audio only, I'll read some of the announcements. There's particularly, there are many announcements in the bulletin today, and so we decided it would take too much time to read all of them, but I'm going to read some of them, and then I will ask for participants who have announcements to raise their hand if they want to join. So let me just read some of these briefly. The first is relation to Decorah UU support. As we continue to find our way through this challenging time, remember, if you need help, let us know. So we might establish a more structured format for supporting one another if you need help picking up groceries or prescriptions or things like that. But for now, simply let Otter know via a phone or an email. And then we'll look for someone who can help out. But the main point is we want to just stress, if you need help during this time, please let us know and don't hesitate to ask. The other announcement I want to make regards our circles. So it seems like a good time to bring back our idea of the UU circles. So sometime this coming week, you may be contacted by a member of our fellowship who is going to help us to stay connected in these small groups of 6 or 7 people. And so we hope that they'll serve a function during this time of self-distancing, that we can stay in touch remotely. Whether you just make a phone call or decide to meet via Zoom or exchange emails about books you are reading or gardens you're planting or what it is you're cooking for dinner, we can help each other get through this time. So when you are contacted, you can find out how you can help. And if you have questions about your role or the circles in general, contact Sue Oddie at Gmail. And her number is listed in the directory. This third announcement I'm going to make is about the fact that we now have a service archive. So if you've missed one of our services that we conducted by Zoom, or you'd like to watch it again, you can go to Decorah UU. And there are 2 links to our new YouTube channel. So we have our own YouTube channel, and you can see that, and you want to press the button in the middle that says watch past services on YouTube. And then once you open the YouTube channel, you can choose which service you want to watch. We'll try and post a link for these. And finally, I want to make an announcement about the Decorah Food Pantry. The Decorah Food Pantry remains open during this time of crisis. The older volunteers have been replaced with younger ones to reduce risk, and a temporary director has been hired. These moves obviously cost money. The need to stay open is clear. Just during the week of March 16th, the pantry served 109 clients with 296 family members, and 16 of these were new clients. So the numbers are growing. As more and more people are laid off. If you can help financially, please send a check to P.O. Box 26, Decorah, or donate through decorahpantry.org. So that is all the announcements that I have Are there any announcements that someone would like to add? If you're joining online, please open participants, click on raise hand, and I'll recognize you to speak. Does anyone have any other announcements?
And before I recognize Ellen McDonald, this is Karen Estrel, and I just want to note that we will talk more later about the new ways that you can find out how to support financially the congregation on the website, but we'll address that during the offering. Ellen McDonald.
Thank you. I won't take time for an extended announcement, but it's garlic mustard season again, and getting outside is a great way to socialize with one or two other people at 6 foot distance. I sent an email to the people that I know have been interested in the past. If you'd like to get that message from me, just let me know. Thank you.
Any other announcements?
Decorah has an announcement. Decorah, great.
There, good morning.
Yep.
Yeah, Decorah Detman. And for those who are members of the Oneota Co-op, I just wanted to remind folks that the annual meeting is going to happen via virtual meeting through a WebEx ISU extension platform, and that's going to be Tuesday at 6:30. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me.
Great. Carolyn, do you have an announcement?
I have an announcement. A group of people have been meeting with Clara Mugley for an anti-racism movement. It's mostly educational. A lot of UUers have been attending since January, and we'll have a large group meeting on Tuesday at I think 6 p.m. But you can reach out to me if you want to know more, because you need the Zoom link to attend. It's very worthwhile and pretty fun group of people too.
I don't see any other people raising their hands in participants. I don't know if we have any folks who are joined just by phone who would like to use *6 to unmute themselves and share an announcement.
Anyone by phone wanting to share an announcement? Hearing none, let's move on to their welcome. Today's service relates to the third UU principle: acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations. Specifically, we are talking about growth through the art form of poetry. April is National Poetry Month, and we celebrate that this morning by hearing from several members, reading their favorite poems. I will talk a little bit more about sort of the nature of poetry and why it brings us together as strongly as it does. But for our chalice lighting today, we will hear the words of a great American poet, Langston Hughes, his poem, "In Time of Silver Rain." In time of silver rain, the earth puts forth new life again. Green grasses grow and flowers lift their heads, and over all the plain, the wonder spreads of life, of life, of life. In time of silver rain, the butterflies lift silken wings to catch a rainbow cry, and trees put forth new leaves to sing in joy beneath the sky, when spring and life are new. For our opening song this morning, we have another great American poet, Maya Angelou. And it's not really a song, but it's her recitation of one of her great poems, "Still I Rise." We do have closed captionings, but be aware that there are some flaws in the closed captioning. So if the words don't make sense, that's because she's a poet and she's not making literal sense. So our opening hymn for today is Maya Angelou reciting her great poem, "Still I Rise."
You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still like dust, I'll rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset?
Sorry, y'all.
You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still like dust, I'll rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? Just because I walk as if I have oil wells pumping in my living room. Just like moons and like suns with the certainty of tides, just like hope springing high, still I rise. Did you want to see me broken, bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cries? Does my sassiness upset you? Don't take it so hard just because I laugh, as if I have gold mines digging in my own backyard. You can shoot me with your words, you can cut me with your lies, you can kill me with your hatefulness, but just like life, I rise. Does my sexiness offend you? Oh. Does it come as a surprise that I dance as if I have diamonds at the meeting of my thighs? Out of the huts of history's shame I rise. Up from a past rooted in pain I rise. A black ocean leaping and wide, welling and swelling and bearing in the tide. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear I rise. Into a daybreak miraculously clear I rise, bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave. I am the hope and the dream of the slave. And so, wow, there I go.
The great American poet, Maya Angelou. We're going to have a reading before Joys and Sorrows, but before we do that reading, I want to remind us all of our land acknowledgement. Countries like New Zealand and Austria and Canada, many tribal nations in the US, it's commonplace to open events and gatherings by acknowledging the traditional indigenous inhabitants of that land. Now, even though we as a congregation are currently in many locations, we would normally convene in the Lingonberry in downtown Decorah. Considering that sacred space, we offer this acknowledgement, building upon text that was created for us by Luther professors Holly Moore, Anna Peterson, and David Faldet, as well as the US Department of Arts and Culture in partnership with Indigenous people. We acknowledge that Northeast Iowa was home to the Iowa, whose traditional name is Bakkozi, the Sac and the Fox. The Fox traditional name was Meskwaki, the Dakota, and the Ho-Chunk, which are sometimes called the Winnebago, though the origin of this name is derogatory, meaning people of the dirty water. People whose relationship to this land continues today. We acknowledge our sad history of broken treaties and the forced migration of indigenous people. We are grateful for the way this land supports and sustains our lives, and thus express also our appreciation for the stewardship of this land by previous inhabitants, indigenous, migrant, and immigrant. May the values of reciprocity and truth-telling, still so vital to indigenous culture, inspire us as we seek a path of peace and justice in our lives together. I invite you to take a moment for reflection upon the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that have shaped our presence here today, and to adopt an attitude of reverence and gratitude for the ongoing resilience of this place and the people who have called it home. So I am going to begin our celebration of poetry with a reading. And this is a reading from the poet Scott Gregory. There's a long poem by William Carlos Williams, late in his career, called Asphodel, That Greeny Flower. And towards the end of that poem, Williams writes, "It is difficult to get the news from poems, yet men die miserably every day for lack of what is found there." What is found in poems? Answering that question is a lot like saying what it is that makes poetry poetry. Scott Gregory tells us he could take a shot or two at doing that, as could you yourself. And by the end of this service, I hope you'll feel more confident about that. What matters is that poems exist in the first place, and that when we read them, and when we write them, and when we know them, we recognize the art form we have seen. Do people really perish for lack of whatever it is that poetry has to offer? Of course they do, sometimes, which isn't to say that poems can save lives, but they can be life-sustaining, life-enriching, life whatever. If you go back to that quote from Williams, there's also a two-part question of whether and how we get the news from poems. The poet refers here to a journalistic notion, this sense of the who, what, where, when, and why. Or maybe, as we like to say today, the content, the deliverables. It's hard to do that getting the news, but you won't often find the latest headline or box scores in the poetry section of your bookstore, nor even at your favorite poetry blog or app. Sometimes even the news is there for the taking, especially when we allow that the news has several different meanings. William Carlos Williams' friend and colleague, Ezra Pound, another great American poet at the early part of the 20th century, he said it this way: "Poetry is news that stays news." It's the second usage of news in Pound's line that really matters here. The information that doesn't become dated or irrelevant with the passage of times. Now, during these days of what we would call a national pandemic, a worldwide pandemic, it's hard to process tragedy on such a grand scale. And tragic events of an overwhelming nature are usually, in terms of how we think of them and how we live through them, just that, overwhelming. And sometimes, moreover, they're incomprehensible. It's all just too big, as they say, or too much. But what we need to focus on in the midst of such overwhelming news and sadness is the small, localized pictures in the face of great pain, vast suffering, and catastrophic loss. When we're facing the worst of the worst in what we call the news, we recognize and retain images, and it's the poets who feed our soul for those images. This is where poetry can show up in its imagery, in its music, its words, its cadence, its pictures, its rhythm. The manifold stuff of poems come back to us with all the immediacy and presence of life itself. In these moments, which are part remembrance and part grace, partly within us and partly beyond us, poetry can help us to cope. And while there are many different kinds of poetry out there, we'll hear just a selection from members of our congregation this morning and from myself. Poetry is the news that you can use. So today, we hope our service, when we listen to these poems brought to us by members of the fellowship, will remind us in celebrating National Poetry Month that sometimes the literal reality is not the only reality. 1 and 1 can add up to 3. And it's the truth beyond that measure that poets help us to understand. That was a reading by Scott Gregory with a last bit of inspirational talk from Nancy Berry. Okay, now we move to joys and sorrows in our service. This is the time when we invite anyone who wishes to do so to share with us a personal joy, concern, or milestone in your life. Please use the raise hand feature to let us to signal to us that you'd like to participate by sharing a joy or concern. And then we'll be sure to give the phone-only participants an opportunity to speak too. So once again, please remember that this is being live streamed and recorded. Does anyone have a joy, sorrow that they would like to share with the congregation? Julie Odie has raised her hand.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. Well, first I'll start with the joy. Some of you know that our daughter is a doctor in Detroit and had COVID, but she's fully recovered and back at work now. So hopefully having immunity and need to be a little less worried about her. But the sorrow is that my cousin's husband in Cedar Rapids is likely going to be taken off the vent today.
Mm.
And so that's all.
Thank you. I see two participants have raised their hands. Julie Fisher.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to speak a word of concern and sorrow for the people of Yemen, who it looks like will now be hit by the virus as well as the devastation, and they have apparently very little help. So bear them in your thoughts and hearts. Thank you.
Are there any audio only participants who would like to share a joy or a concern? Anyone else?
This is Lolly. Can you hear me?
Yes, Lolly, we can.
Oh my goodness, that's so great. Oh, what I wanted to mention as a concern and a joy, because I teach the Bach flowers, I just wanted to let people know that if you ask the co-op to, there is a remedy called the 5-flower formula for stress, and it will take your stress down in seconds. So that's called the 5-flower formula, and the co-op sells it. Also, if you prefer, you can buy Rescue Remedy, which will also take your stress down. Both of those are Bach flowers, and they will help you get through the tough times that we have ahead. And I'm so glad you can hear me. Thank you.
Thank you, Lolly. Hearing no one else or seeing no one else, I will now light a virtual candle for the joys or concerns that are unspoken, but remain in our hearts and minds. Please join me in a moment of communal silent meditation. Please remain muted, but join me in singing the response printed in your bulletin, pasted in the chat and on screen. Thank you to Otter Dreaming for recording this accompaniment, which will play. Next in our service, we have the offering, and I have one announcement to help us move into the offering. Decorah UU has set up online payment primarily for donations that you might otherwise make in person in the fellowship. So go to the Decorah UU homepage and click on Give Online, which will take you to the giving page. There you'll find the donate button, which will send your payment through PayPal. You do not need a PayPal account. You will be asked to choose whether your donations is for Share the Plate or the Decorah UU. You can only choose one, so if you want to donate to both, I'm sorry to say you'll have to repeat the process. You can use a debit or a credit card. Below the donate button on the giving page, you may also consider two options for recurring donations. Please understand, we are so appreciative of the gracious gifts of our members and friends, whether they're given on a weekly, a monthly, or an annual basis. We understand that present circumstances and uncertainty may affect your ability to make a financial commitment to Decorah UU, but know that we value your gracious gifts to our fellowship in whatever form they take. And I will also say while we're doing the offering that I know Beth Wahlberg is hoping to receive all of our annual contributions and stewardship commitments to the fellowship. So I think this was the week that she wanted those. If you've not had a chance to return those to Beth, please try to get to it in the next day or two. And now if we can have the music of our offering for all that is our life. Thank you. Thank you for the accompaniment from Otter for that. And thank you for all the gifts you give to the fellowship. We're calling our service today a shared collection of poems in celebration of National Poetry Month. I wanted to find out when it happened that April became National Poetry Month, and I was not able in my pre-service task to take care of that. But we have been celebrating April as National Poetry Month for several years in the United States. And the reason I think that we do it is partly because it's spring, which is always a time when our hearts kind of naturally turn to poetry. And I think it's important that we honor this sacred art form by which poets have helped us to see beyond the immediate circumstances in our lives and to enjoy the transcendent reality that art points us toward through its music, through its language, through its imagery. So what we thought we would do today is invite members of the fellowship to share their favorite poems. And we have several here that we're going to do. let's do My Spirit Guide is a Dandelion. My Spirit Guide is a Dandelion. And is that from Sue? Who is it? Yeah, Sue Oddie.
Yes.
Can you
Yes.
unmute yourself and read that poem for us,
Thank
Sue?
you. Thank you, Nancy. Before I read this, I want to say that we're getting close to this time of year, and all of a sudden the weed killer is going everywhere, and it always upsets me to know that these children and our pets are playing on this grass, and yet we seem to be so worried and so concerned about something that I just don't understand it. So I discovered this poem a few years ago, and I thought it kind of gave me a new perspective. The neighbors are relieved that I finally weeded the front drive. I had not the heart to do it before. Sent out to scout, rogue milkweed, crabgrass, fescue, lodge in the tiniest of sidewalk cracks. Sometimes the root is only a hair, sometimes straight into concrete. They are the mail cutters breaking up the ice so that the rest of the natural world may follow. We have poured out glaciers of concrete. We are trapped, frozen within. But there will come dandelions in every small crack. We have poured out black asphalt lava. We are trapped, ashen within. But there will come crabgrass in every minute pore. Then arrives the pill bug, the ant colony, the spider, the new bit of earth, soon a tree sprouting. The widening of the crack and the loosening of our bonds. Yet how we resist being saved when we count our folly, this pavement, as our only foundation, discounting the entire planet it rests upon. The neighbors are relieved that I finally weeded the front drive. I'm relieved that I'll have to keep doing it again and again.
Thank you, Sue. It's a lovely poem. Do you want to say anything more about that?
Just don't worry about the dandelions.
Yeah.
I think we have other things to be concerned with now anyway.
Yes, absolutely. I think I want to turn to one of my Emily Dickinson poems. Karen, if you can bring up the Emily Dickinson poem. This is one of my all-time favorite definitions for poems. And it's as you see, it's number 1263 in Emily Dickinson's vast catalog of poems. But to me, this is why poetry does what it does so well. She tells us, tell all the truth, but tell it slant. Success in circuit lies, too bright for our infirm delight, the truth's superb surprise. As lightning to the children eased with explanation kind, the truth must dazzle gradually, or every man be blind. The truth must dazzle gradually, or every man be blind. We never know when lightning's going to strike, and thankfully for us, when it does, it often misses a direct hit. But poetry, in telling it slant, gives us what it is we most need from life, which is the news of how we live with dandelions and sidewalks and spring. So let's hear another poem from, let's do Wendell Berry's poem, The Peace of Wild Things. I think Ellen McDonald gave us this poem. Ellen, are you there?
I am.
Can you read it? Read it for us and talk to us about this poem.
Okay. This is one that's become so wildly popular that sometimes I think, well, it can't really be my favorite poem. It's so out there in the popular press. I should be a little more elite. But I have a little slip of paper with this on it that's on our refrigerator, and it surfaced a few years ago from a from a box of Christmas cards that I had sent back in probably the mid-'80s. I'd included a little Xerox of this poem for all my friends. And it never ceases to be good, least of all now, when some of us are finding our solace in getting outdoors. The Peace of Wild Things by Wendell Berry. When despair for the world grows in me and I wake in the night at the least sound in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. For a time, I rest in the grace of the world and am free.
Oh, that's such a great poem. Such a great poem. Thank you, Ellen, for that. I always want to have kind of a moment of silence after I read a great poem like that, because I just want to dwell in its language. I'm so grateful for Karen for getting these words up so that we can all kind of meditate on them. The grace of the world and am free. The day blind stars. What a great image that is. I see that Ellen Rockney has a poem that she would like to share. Before we do that, let's have Why I Wake Early by Mary Oliver. Who was it who sent me that? I'm sorry, I can't remember who sent me Why I Wake Early. Julie Fisher. Julie Fisher, can you read Mary Oliver's poem for us?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hello, sun in my face. Hello, you who make the morning and spread it over the fields and into the faces of the tulips and the nodding morning glories, and into the windows of even the miserable and crotchety. Best preacher that ever was, dear star, that just happens to be where you are in the universe, to keep us from ever darkness, to ease us with warm touching, to hold us in the great hands of light. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Watch now how I start the day in happiness and kindness.
Thank you, Julie. Do you want to talk a little bit about that poem, about how you encountered it for the first time or when it became one of your favorites?
Well, it just reminds me how to start the day, and that each day is new, and that there will be new things and old things to be thankful for. And so it's kind of taking the scales off your eyes and ears and being ready to feel things new. I don't know when it became one of my favorites, but I like it very much, and I look back to it.
Yeah, thank you. It's so wonderful. I love it when poets just repeat words. You know, Langston Hughes did it in our opening poem, when spring of life, and Mary Oliver's doing it here with good morning, good morning, good morning.
Yeah.
We're taught so much to be afraid of repetition. You know, if you ask students in a writing class, what were you told about repeating yourself? They all say to a person, oh, you shouldn't do it. You shouldn't do it. You'll bore the reader. But poets understand that repetition is in fact the most basic way we get the music and the imagery of a particular poem. And I just love that Mary Oliver just insists on this idea of a good morning. The other thing I love from this poem is faces of tulips, because they do have faces. And it's one of the ways in which the poet sort of teases us into see things both as they intrinsically are, and yet somehow with a little bit of metaphor.
I love
So
the
thank
great
you for
hands
that.
of light too, the great hands of light. You don't think of
Yes,
it ordinarily.
absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, Julie. I really appreciate it. Karen, let's bring up, let me read one and then we'll go to Ellen Rockney's poem. Let me read the one by James Wright. This is one of my all-time favorite poems. A Blessing. A Blessing by James Wright. And some of you may actually know the place that he's referring to off the highway to Rochester, Minnesota, because you have seen these horses in this field. A Blessing by James Wright. Just off the highway to Rochester, Minnesota, twilight bounds softly forth on the grass, and the eyes of those two Indian ponies darken with kindness. They have come gladly out of the willows to welcome my friend and me. We step over the barbed wire into the pasture where they have been grazing all day alone. They ripple tensely. They can hardly contain their happiness that we have come. They bow shyly as wet swans. They love each other. There is no loneliness like theirs. At home once more, they begin munching the young tufts of spring in the darkness. I would like to hold the slenderer one in my arms, for she has walked over to me and nuzzled my left hand. She is black and white. Her mane falls wild on her forehead, and the light breeze moves me to caress her long ear that is delicate as the skin over a girl's wrist. Suddenly, I realize that if I stepped out of my body, I would break into blossom. I don't know why this is one of my favorite poems, but I certainly know that its last line, if I stepped out of my body, I would break into blossom, is something that captures for me this sort of way in which some experiences lift us out of ourselves and transport us to a place that seems to be both in and out of the body. And I just think James Wright captures that so well. And I always think of it when I drive by that road on towards Rochester, Minnesota, when I sometimes see those horses. And I think sometimes of stopping like he did and going up to touch the horses. And I think that's why we love poets, because poets are the ones who do, in fact, get out of the car, walk to the horses, caress their long ears, and give us this sense of touching the ineffable and the beautiful, transcendent stuff of life. A Blessing by James Wright. Thank you all very much. So I see that Ellen Rockney has a poem for us.
I do. In thinking about this service, I realized that this poem has become a favorite of mine. And it was written by my son. It was written for Heidi Sweats. I had the privilege of homeschooling my kids, raising them up with a community of parents here over the years. And Heidi was one of them. And while I would do plays with the kids and music, you can only imagine all that she brought to them. And so she had been struggling with her health, and Elsa, her daughter, had asked for some sort of squares, a quilt square type things for her birthday from paper, thoughts. And this is what Gabe wrote. It is hanging in the window of the Lingonberry right now with a lot of other sort of springtime stories, with art by Matthew Andreas. So it's called Earth Mother. When I think of you, it is with thoughts of butterflies and flowers. I did not know their names until you told me, like a precious secret, like this knowledge was the only true wealth, and how lucky that we could be rich together. Perhaps I would not know to love the world from the roots up as you do, without your quiet enthusiasm for everything that grows. It might seem a perilous undertaking of the spirit to see what beauty is still alive in this world of smoke and speed and fear. But as I question if there is hope for us in the times to come, I remember you in your garden, smiling and showing us that hope is everywhere if you know where to look.
Thank you. Thank you, Ellen. Hope is everywhere if you know where to look. That's
Yes.
a beautiful image for this morning. Thanks so much for sharing that. I really appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anyone else who's been inspired to kind of share a poem with us? Okay, how about let's have one more poem. This is oh, Jean Day. Jean has one. Jean. Okay, Jean, let's hear your poem.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, mine is nothing serious like everybody else's here, but it's one that I've actually carried in my wallet for years. So I'm going to, okay, I was going to share it, but I can't. So I will just read it to you.
Okay.
I read this actually a couple of years ago at the UU thing. It's called, I Wish I Were a Bear. If you're a bear, you get to hibernate. You do nothing but sleep for 6 months. I could get used to that. And another thing, before you hibernate, you're supposed to eat yourself stupid. That wouldn't bother me either. If you're a mama bear, everyone knows you mean business. You swat anyone who bothers you or your cubs. If your cubs get out of line, you swat them too. Your husband expects you to growl when you wake up. He expects you to have hairy legs and excess body fat. He likes it. I wish I were a bear. Source unknown.
Oh.
It's absolutely silly. And like I said, I've carried it in my wallet for years.
You know, thank you, Jean. And I'm so happy that you shared that poem, because it is important for us to remember sometimes we get into the solemnness of poetry and the sort of reverence of poetry as this inflated language and these very complicated metaphors. And I love the fact that you reminded us all that poetry also is comical, and it makes jokes, and it highlights things that anyone from a young child to a very elderly person can understand. So thank you for that. I really am glad that got added to our potpourri. Anyone else who has a poem? Okay, I'm going to read one more by Walt Whitman. I just think that if you ever have a gathering of poets and you don't include Walt Whitman, you're tempting the gods. You're just not, you sort of, you know, I mean, Walt Whitman is one of our great American poets, and Song of Myself was a landmark work of art in the 19th century because it proclaimed an individual voice, an American spirit, and a poetic wonder. The way in which Walt Whitman wrote these poetic lines was so different than the typical verse of the 19th century. So I'm going to read you a passage from Song of Myself, and it's to celebrate the earthiness, the embodiment, and the beauty of our lives here on earth. Who goes there? Hankering, gross, mystical, nude. How is it I extract strength from the beef I eat? What is a man, anyhow? What am I? What are you? All I mark as my own, you shall offset it with your own, else it were time lost listening to me. I do not snivel that snivel the world over, that months are vacuums and the ground but wallow in filth. Whimpering and truckling fold with powders for invalids, conformity goes to the, sorry, I can't see that line in my thing here. Conformity goes to the, oh, sorry, oh, now I lost it. I gotta bring up my poem, sorry. I wear my hat, forgive me, Walt Whitman, I'm sorry for this. I wear my hat as I please, indoors or out. Such a great line to kind of stumble over, because it's exactly what we're doing. We're wearing our hats as our please, as we please, indoors or out.
Yeah, Nancy, just to say, is conformity goes to the fourth removed. My apologies for cutting that off.
Oh, okay. Conformity goes to the fourth remove. I wear my hat as I please, indoors or out. Why should I pray? Why should I venerate it and be ceremonious, having pried through the strata, analyzed to a hair, counseled with doctors, and calculated?
Closed.
I find calculated.
Close.
I find no sweeter fat than sticks to my own bones. In all people I see myself, none more and not one a barleycorn less. And the good or bad I say of myself, I say of them. I know I am solid and sound. To me, the converging objects of the universe perpetually flow. All are written to me, and I must get what the writing means. I know I am deathless. I know this orbit of mine cannot be swept by a carpenter's compass. I know I shall not pass like a child's carlicue cut with a burnt stick at night. I know I am august. I do not trouble my spirit to vindicate itself or be understood. I see that the elementary laws never apologize. I reckon I behave no prouder than the level I've plant my home by, after all. I exist as I am, that is enough. If no other in the world be aware, I sit content. And if each and all be aware, I sit content. One world is aware, and by far the largest to me, and that is myself. And whether I come to my own today or in 10,000 or 10 million years, I can cheerfully take it now, or with equal cheerfulness, I can wait. My foothold is tenoned and mortised in granite. I laugh at what you call dissolution, and I know the amplitude of time. Walt Whitman. Thanks to everyone for these lovely poems for today. They're going to carry me all through the week. And I appreciate that so much. I want to conclude the service with a song. One of the great, poems are songs at heart, and songs are always poems. And this particular song is by one of America's greatest poets. He was a wanderer, he was a troubadour, it was Woody Guthrie. And he wrote these lyrics and he sang this song that I'm going to conclude our service with this morning before we extinguish the chalice. And again, mute your microphone and sing along with this, because we're being led by Pete Seeger, that great mentor of all of us in the Unitarian Church. And Bruce Springsteen is also on stage, and there's one other person on stage that I can't name right now. But join in with them as they sing this great American poem, "This Land Is Your Land."
We'd like you to join us in perhaps with the greatest song ever written about our home. The father of American folk music, Pete Seeger, his grandson, Tyler. Lead us, Pete. We'd like you to join us in perhaps with the greatest song ever written about our home. The father of American folk music, Pete Seeger, his grandson, Tyler. Lead us, Pete.
You sing it with us. We'll give you the words. When I was walking that ribbon of highway, as I went walking that ribbon of highway, I saw above me, and in the skyway, I saw below me that golden valley. This land was made for you and me. Everybody sing it. This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Island. From the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream water. This land was made for you and me. I roamed and I rambled, and I followed my footsteps to the sparkling sands of her diamond deserts, and all around me a voice was sounding. This land was made for you and me. Everybody. This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Island.
the city, by the shadow of the steeple, by the relief office, I saw my people as they stood there hungry. I stood whistling. This land was made for you and me. A great high wall tried to stop me. Great big sign there. Private property. On the other side, it didn't say nothing. That sign was made for you and me. This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. Yeah, this land was made for you and me. Nobody living. Never stop me. I go walking. Freedom Highway. Nobody living. Make me turn back. Parents' land. This land was made for you and me. Everybody, this land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me.
Pete Seeger. And now, as we extinguish the chalice, we read some more words. Wendell Berry. We clasp the hands of those that go before us, and the hands of those who come after us. We enter the little circle of each other's arms, and the larger circle of lovers whose hands are joined in a dance, and the larger circle of all poets passing in and out of life, who move also in a dance to a music so subtle and vast that no one hears it except in fragments. Thank you all very much. Have a good week. We'll see you next time. Thank you.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Goodbye.
Thank you,
Goodbye.
Nancy.
Oh, my pleasure. Happy Poetry Month. Happy Poetry Month.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you, Alan. Thanks for reading your poem. That's such a beautiful one.
You were brilliant.
Oh, thanks. I was happy to do it. It was a great excuse for me to get into poems. I spent a couple hours this week just reading the poems. Thanks to Karen and Carolyn for their help today. I really appreciate everybody's help in making this technology thing happen. Thank you all very much. Happy Easter to you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.